Coming up on the payoff. This is a big one for me. I've gotten to know a lot of great sober people through my journey in sobriety, especially on the other side, in 9+ years of sobriety. But there's only one first in life, as we all know. And this guy, Pete, was the first guy I ever knew to get sober personally. And he did it at 17 years old. We'll get into all the gritty details, but he bottomed out before high school was over. And I watched him do whatever it took to get sober, to go to any lengths to get sober in a climate which at this time, not a lot of young kids were getting sober. Now it's a different story. Things have opened up, or many would say that things have gotten worse, right, with opioids and things like that. But this guy showed me the way. And he actually lit the way, because every time I fell and thought I was having that moment of clarity, I called him. And quickly that moment of clarity clouded up again many, many times until finally it didn't. And once again, he was there. So without further ado, a guy who has been a huge part of my life personally, has helped me with things professionally, and is a guy that I consider family. Peter F. But first, is this guy's album going to come out or what? He actually just put a new single out on Spotify, A Perfect Wave. It's a live acoustic version. If you haven't listened yet, you're missing out. Kevin Sousa.
Stand by the ocean floor.
All right, give a countdown when you're comfortable.
Me?
Yeah.
All right.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Good.
And then can I drink during this at all? Okay. All right. 10, 9. Can I take my pants off? 10,
Actually,
9.
yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, yeah, you're good. You're good. Do you want to move it so you can see me?
How would I do that? Like
There you
this?
go. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
There you go.
I want to make sure I'm still talking into it.
Yeah, you sound really good.
All right.
You've got a good voice.
Yes, thank you.
For this kind of
I'm a
thing.
great radio face.
Now, by the way, Pete is with us today. You're the only person that would show up 30 minutes late and then ask for 2 minutes to meditate.
Well, I thought it'd be good to just get centered before we got started, you know?
A real question now. Where does that take you? That 2 minutes of meditation? Because we got in here, we've been scrambled kind of all morning. You're on the road. You're moving from Phoenix to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
What's the thought process there?
Just to slow down and take a pause, get present where I'm at, forget about all the other stuff that's going on, so I can just be present and try to tap into whatever God inspiration there is. Telling my story, right? Anytime I'm gonna do that, I want to make sure that I'm just letting the spirit guide me, as opposed to this is how I want to sound or come across and any of that stuff. And then the 2 minutes helps me get a little more real.
Any big moment I kind of have in my life now, I find myself, any big moment, before I'll be like, God, I need you to kind of ride shotgun with me on this. And it's almost like it's a muscle memory to this point.
Oh yeah. It's what you learn when you get sober. You know, that's a big part of it for me. And there's been many a time I just, whether it's hitting my knees and just saying, God, I need some help. And I don't even know, sometimes I don't even know exactly what I'm praying to. You know, I'm not exactly super clear on it's a religious figure as much as it's like we talk about in the rooms. It's just a higher power, and it's not me.
When did you have your first drink?
Well, technically first drink would have been on my dad's lap, as a kid, running back and forth from our kegerator to give him to pour him a drink. And he was not an alcoholic. He never saw him drunk, but there was alcohol in our house. Almost everyone in my dad's family had a keg on tap in their house, and that was just part of it. And So I remember as a kid, we would keep mugs in the freezer for my mom's dad who'd come over, and he really loved to drink a beer out of a frosted mug. My grandfather Larry, and I used to love to be he taught me how to pour a drink and tilt it the right angle so there wasn't a head, and I used to love bringing them beers and then having a sip. So that was the first time I actually tasted alcohol. I think the first time I drank sort of on my own was, I think Rob Enoch came and slept over in like maybe it was 6th or 7th grade. We had a keg on tap. My dad had a lock, but I knew how to unlock it. And we had a couple beers. And I remember feeling that was the first time I probably got a little buzz on. And then the first time I drank at a party was a friend of mine, John Rhodes' parents went away, and
What grade?
7th grade. I think it was spring of 7th grade. And he had an older sister, and there was, we snuck some drinks, and I just thought I remember like the next day thinking that was amazing and I'm going to do that every weekend. And it really, I heard someone describe this in a meeting once, and it triggered for me. It was the first time I got drunk was like God came down and kissed me on the brain. It was a magical experience for me. And my reaction was, holy shit, I really like that. That is awesome. That is so predictable and repeatable. I'm going to this is totally redefining how I think about my weekends. And then I think pretty early on, I was concerned that I like this more than everyone else. And my biggest fear was that, maybe not that year, but within 2 years, was if I don't slow down, I could turn into an alcoholic and I wouldn't be able to drink anymore. And so it was this idea that if I turn into an alcoholic, then I'll have to stop drinking, and I'll have to miss this thing that's the most dependable, predictable thing in my life. So early on, it was pretty emotional. It was like an emotional connection, I would say.
Spiritual experience.
And I would also say that as a kid, we'll get into my story. I was pretty much an after-school special.
You were. I have experience because you were a big part of my life. To give people a background, Pete and I grew up. You grew up right behind campus of Villanova University. Yeah. I believe really one of the first times we met, I know we probably played Little League together, but was it a keg party? Was that, your uncle, that family was a huge part of Villanova.
Yeah.
And I know it was that they had these awesome keg parties. Villanova basketball players were there. I met Gary McLean at your uncle's house, Yeah. That's when I met you, and you were like a good time back then. You always had a big smile, and you're this gregarious guy, and it was like, this guy is fun. That's what you brought. Like, this guy is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would say that was, that was a great house. My aunt's house. It was my grandfather's. My dad grew up there, and my grandfather, I think, started the tradition of parties at right next to campus, parties after Villanova football games. And then my uncle played football there, and my aunt and uncle would have keg parties after the games.
And my mom knew your uncle from back in Villanova. Yeah.
And so I grew up around a lot of parties and never really there was never anything negative or inappropriate or bad about it. It was, my aunts and uncles and parents were social drinkers, but they loved to have a good time. And so I would say that in life, as I came up, I never felt like I wasn't like the straight A+ student that was, set his sights on Harvard. I was a mediocre athlete. I was not going to be an All-American with a full ride. And in my mind, I'm very, was very, at that time, very kind of like black or white. Like, the things that mattered for your self-esteem for me growing up was, am I identifying as a student? Am I going to be the number one athlete? And it was no on two of those. And the third was like, well, can I show up at a party and have a good time? And it was like a full body yes. And I loved hanging out with older kids at parties, at family parties, older cousins. And then when I introduced alcohol, it was, I feel like I could go in any situation socially and be the life of the party. And that was pretty empowering and felt good, frankly. That was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be good at this.
One second. Mike, I think your mic is up because I can hear you clicking. Is that it? Okay, there you go. Okay. No problem. It was fine. So tell me how your life became, you touched on it being an after school special. How does it devolve into an after school special?
I don't know. I think there's a couple things that set me up for it. When I was real little, my dad got sick with cancer, and my mom was pregnant with my sister. So my first 2 or 3 years, I think I was shuffled around a lot and to like aunts and uncles. I just remember my first memory of like a real sort of painful experience was visiting. I was with my grandmother and my aunt. We went down to the hospital, like CHOP or Penn or whatever, wherever my dad was. He's in the hospital. And I remember visiting him, and we were going to see Santa, get our picture taken with Santa. And we stopped to see him first. And I remember feeling like they're not telling me, but he's about to die, and that this is my farewell to him for some reason. I remember getting really upset, and that wasn't the case. But it was like he was sick. I don't really have many memories of it other than that. And then he was in remission. He was told he had 6 months to live. I was a little kid. My mom was pregnant. So it was a pretty intense. I can imagine how intense the home life was there. And then he got better, and we went on a trip to Hilton Head, and like that's like where I start remembering life. And there was always.
How old were you at this time?
I don't know. I think 5, 6 maybe by the time he kind of came out of it. And there was always this feeling for me growing up that, the other shoe was going to drop and he could get sick at any time. And that was very scary or just, kind of a non-stable feeling that I had. And then I remember, as I think about like putting the pieces together, like what set me up for what I'm about to share was that, there was that both of my grandfathers were alcoholics. My parents would say.
Your middle name is Ortlieb. That's a beer.
So my dad, that was the other thing. My dad's family owned a brewery from 1869 to the 1970s, I think. So it was not in the family by the time I was born, but it was a big part of my dad's growing up. I'm named, the beer was called Ortlieb's. That's my middle name. So even as a kid, like first day of school, they're running through the roster, Peter Ortlieb Flick, and they're like, so like, were your parents really big partiers? Like, did they name you after a beer? And it would always get chuckles, and it was kind of a source of, it was definitely a source of pride in the family. Like that business really accommodated a certain lifestyle in families, in like past generations and stuff. And so my dad never worked in that. And by the time we came along, it was kind of long gone and was not producing anything for the family. But it was I remember being a kid so young that I was scared to sleep on the third floor, and my nightlight was an Ortlieb's beer sign that I found in the attic. And I was fascinated with beer. Like, I had beer pictures on the wall, and my mom hated it, and my dad was like, it's family, it's part of the family stuff. And so they were always a little bit, had maybe some different experiences. But I did not know it at the time, I would hear great stories about my grandfathers, how fun they were, and how they would kind of get into trouble here and there, but really kind of strong personalities. And I think I loved those stories. I was just, I remember in 7th grade seeing the movie Animal House and being like, that is what I tried to convince friends in 7th grade we should have a toga party, and they were like, we haven't even hit puberty yet. Like, I don't think I'm down with that. And so I was just drawn to that sort of energy, if you will. And then when I experienced, so the pump was prime before I even picked up like a drink, really. And once it started, it was definitely off to the races. 7th grade, and by 8th grade, I'd gotten into some trouble, took the car out when I wasn't, before I had a license and things like that.
So even when you're not quote unquote drunk, you're still acting out.
Yeah, I'm acting out, and I'm
you got that ism.
Yeah, totally. Like I'm going to be good at like being social and like doing what I want, and that's going to be my thing, because and frankly it was because I didn't think I could be as successful as I felt I needed to be in other areas, and I was just looking for something to be good at, and it was misguided. And I was an impulsive, undisciplined kid for sure. My parents did a great job.
You have awesome parents. I mean,
it had nothing to do with really their parenting. I was just, I don't care who you are. Like, you tell me that I can't do something, if I wanted to do it, I was going to do it. And it was just a very I remember going to one of my older cousins' graduations. We would go to their college graduations, and we're up at Amherst, and I'm so excited because I'm thinking
in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to drink.
How old were you?
I was in probably summer going into 8th grade.
Okay.
And
if I ever look at that, that's just for time, so don't worry about it.
And I'm up there, and I think about this because it was just such a kind of a red flag. And it's like 10 o'clock, and I'm like, my parents are gonna leave, and I can hang out with my older cousins. And so it's 10, and the parents are leaving, and I'm like, I'm staying. And my cousin said, no way is he staying here. And so they take me back home with them, and I'm crying, literally having a temper tantrum. So I was so young, but it was like I was so upset. I was so upset that I couldn't stay and do this. And then fast forward to 8th grade, or going into high school. I get this idea to build a speakeasy in the woods, to sort of have parties in. And,
which becomes a success.
Well, it was a short success, but it's a great story. It's a funny story. And so I was at a summer camp in New Hampshire, and I'm looking all summer at just how the cabin's built, and I'm thinking, when I get back, I could build one of these cabins, and we could have parties and like casino nights, and it would just be an epic way to go into high school. And so I get back, and I start like
casino night,
drawing plans. It was like Harlem Night meets like I don't know what. I was really envisioning it, and so I get Matt Pierce and Paul O'Connor, and we start. That was the crew.
Two of our guys from back.
Yeah. And we found this great little piece of land like right behind our houses that was just no one would know. And so we start building this thing, and
Matt Pierce builds houses
now
now.
he's a builder. Yeah. Yeah. And so we build this 2-story shack with drywall, like cement footers, cedar shingles, and then the word got out to some kids, and they're starting to contribute materials. I mean, we didn't buy any of the materials, so we had this little routine where my one of my cousins would come up at like 12:30, after midnight. It would come down the street with his lights off. We convinced him. He was like a really good kid, and we just convinced him to help us transport lumber. And we'd sneak out of our houses in all black, get in the car. He'd drive to some job site where something's getting built, and we'd put together a bunch of wood. And he'd come back, and we'd load his Suburban and drop it off at the place. And
He's older than you.
Yeah, he's older.
So the manipulation starts early.
Yeah, and then we would get up in the morning at like 6 a.m. and start building. And it's kind of an interesting story, because that's like, to me, it was an example of something that I got really. I used vision. I was convincing people to do it. It was misguided, and we were stealing wood, but we were getting up early, working hard, like figuring out, how do we build this, how do we do this, and it felt really like the whole thing felt great. Like it was fun to sneak out. It felt like we were like in the military, like that. As a kid, like that type of stuff seemed a lot more interesting than just being home and like doing reading the summer book that someone told me to read, and doing homework. And so we, first weekend of high school, we have this party, and, I feel like I'm on top of the world. I just feel like I'm doing what I want to do. And
a lot of people show up.
Yeah, there's a bunch of older kids showing up, and I'm I didn't hit puberty till like sophomore year. So I'm like 105 pounds as a freshman in high school. I was 205 by senior year. So I was a total late bloomer, and I'm having this party, and with these other guys, and we go home, and then we sneak out again, and my mom catches us, and my dad takes me. He wakes me up in the morning. He's like, "You need to." They knew we were building a fort, but they didn't know anything else. And they just thought, it's great that they're doing a fort. And he walks me. I walk him over to where it is. It's it was like 2 miles from our house, and we kind of come through the woods. The sun's coming through the trees, the smoke of the fire, and he sees the house. And I grew up building a lot of stuff with my dad, and he sees the house, and he like puts his arm around me, and he's like, "Wow." and then we had to tear it down, and that was the end of it. But it was like, that was where my energy went.
It's in the name of getting fucked up. I mean, all this energy, everything you're putting in there's excitement. It's amazing. People say the alcoholic mind is brilliant in a lot of cases, and it's
resourceful.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
It was just resourceful. I mean, I remember being in class in high school thinking like, I could build like drawing things I could build. Like I could build a shelf in my room with like a bar hidden behind it. And then I'm like, but I can't do that, because if I actually filled it with alcohol, I'd drink it all. And so like there was a lot of energy and thought around that. Just drinking, and when am I? And that's how it started. And then I would say, that was sort of like the honeymoon phase. Maybe the first 2 years, and then things got, they progressed in a way where it was then waking up feeling like, what did I do? I know I offended someone. I know. The feeling that
and we're talking about high school still. I mean,
because
you got
like
sober,
seventh, eighth.
You got
grade,
sober early, so you're having these
sophomore, junior
your
year.
progression is quicker than most, and it's a story that's a lot of young people can relate to today, in a sense where people are bottoming out earlier because of whether it's the drugs out there or whether it's just this culture, whatever you want to call it. That story wasn't being told too often when you were living it. The young people getting sober. I mean, there was like, what's going on? you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd say it. I mean, there were some drugs in my story, but it was mostly drinking, and it was mostly drinking till maybe junior year, and when I met you, and then it got a lot.
Yeah.
It got very advanced very quickly, but it was. Yeah, I mean, I was running 100 miles an hour into a wall. Is really what was going on, and I don't know. I mean, in now I'm very grateful that I kind of bottomed out early. I was funny. I was talking to our friend Bart, and as we're moving back, and he's helping facilitate some introductions to some schools. I'm like, hey man, my kids are not, just to be clear, they're not like me. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, you just had a bad 18-month run. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah, the alcohol can use like,
pretty,
yeah, maybe.
Pretty bad. But to your point, in terms of examples, I mean, the way it kind of went for me is drinking was fun and powerful and predictable, and then it stopped working, and then it became really a job, and then it became a real source of shame and guilt and a lot of, I'm not going to drink today, and then I start drinking, and I'm on my third high school in 3 years, because I got kicked out of one, I left another, and ended up at a great all boys Catholic school outside of Philadelphia that really and that's when I kind of met you, like kind of hung out with a different crew. And I think for me, where it really fell off a cliff was I sort of trace it back to meeting you. You guys were a year ahead, so
Mm-hmm.
you were seniors, so it was kind of your farewell tour.
Yeah.
I was a junior.
I mean, and that's all I was doing at that point. I mean, that for me, all intents and purposes, is that time in my life led to my heart problem, really.
Yeah.
I mean, because uppers, downers, whatever we get our hands on, I mean, it was like we were just running out of control, because I had discovered these prescription drugs, which I thought was like discovering plutonium. I mean, I'm taking this stuff before I go to school. I'm flying high, and I'm like, I got to show people this stuff. I'm like, Pete,
Yeah.
like, you got to take this. And so that led to, and you had the kegerator on hand at your house. We would go up on your third floor, take a couple Percocets and have 4 beers and watch Villanova play UConn, and they win the Big East tournament. And I was like, it can't get any better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was when, I mean, you had gotten a scholarship, you were going to Richmond, like, you were all set. And, I'm in junior year, I'm supposed to be buckling down and taking SATs and visiting colleges. And I remember you introduced me to Percocets, and I'm like, all right. And like, we start going, every time we go out to a party, we realize we can just go to the parents' bathroom, and they probably have a ton of old Percocets from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that literally took me down to a really dark place within 90 days, I would say. I mean, maybe 100 days.
And we had friends that were like, and these, we're not talking about angels. They were like, hey, what are you guys doing with this stuff?
Yeah.
Like not good. And I was long gone too by that point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just to give a sense of how bad it got, how quickly for me, we probably started hanging out. I think the first time we sort of re-hung out at a party was like Halloween of your senior year. And by prom time, I was severely depressed, and I was so depressed and struggling. Like I was like, I never asked to be here, was kind of how I felt like in life. I didn't even take my junior year exams. I mean, I just had completely sort of, I was like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do anything. I mean, it was like a quarter of funness. And then pretty quickly, even the guys we were hanging out with, I think I was feeling like I couldn't tell them everything I was doing.
Well, and today, and that's the difference between today In our time today, you and I become heroin addicts, and we probably die.
Probably.
I mean,
There was no. I mean, we fortunately didn't have access to heroin,
No.
cocaine.
no. Well, I mean, and all those. The opioid scene was not as big as it
Molly,
was. Yeah,
that wasn't around.
No.
for
and
our group.
And now kids are taking, they're taking whatchamacallit, like Oxycontins, and then they can't get those anymore because they run out of money, and then the heroin's the next. Well, and we would have done it if it was there. I mean, we were that. It just wasn't there.
I never said no. I mean, I'd take it and say, what did I just take?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm super fortunate that. I mean, I just had no ability to make decisions or think about anything other than the moment. There was a lot of, I mean, there was some mental health stuff going on, I think. And
that we don't know which is which, right? Until you're sober.
You don't. You really don't.
Which mental health is a huge thing.
A lot of the mental health stuff cleared up when I got sober. Right?
Yeah. And a lot of people have legitimate mental health stuff,
Yeah. I mean, I remember, it was like junior year, things got really bad, and I was not in a good headspace, and I sort of stopped opting in for school, and so my parents were very concerned. I'm seeing a therapist, and I remember asking the guy, hey, do you think, I remember building up the courage, like, I'm going to ask him next session if he thinks I'm an alcoholic. And I did, and he said, no, I don't think so. And I was like, great. And I remember another time, like, I'd get really down about, like, dude, I think I might have a problem here. And I remember sitting with you on like a Tuesday night at the Iron Gate, being like, Seuss, like, I'm like, I'll have a water.
The Iron Gate was a bar in Havertown.
Yeah.
That we will get.
Like, I tell my mom, I'm like, I'm going to study at Nangle's house or something, and like, we'd go
and get hammered.
I'd have her minivan, and it was a disaster. I mean, I think like God had to be looking out for us, because there was no caution exercised in any way, and we would get hammered and then do stupid stuff, and I remember being hungover in like math, like algebra class, like super hungover, because I come home, I could hide it super well. I mean, it was just very easy to hide. I could have a ton of beers and.
Because you and I were the same, those big personalities.
Yeah.
So you come home, as long as you didn't stink, to like, I would smoke weed and come home. It didn't really, you never knew what you were going to get out of us, even today, right? So that's back then. They were like, oh, he's just being himself.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember asking you, like, Pete, I think I might be an alcoholic, and like that's like the worst thing to do, like convince your alcoholic. Ask your alcoholic friend to convince you you're not an alcoholic. And you're like, dude, I don't think you are. I'm like, all right, I'll have a beer, And so it was really short-lived. And I remember most nights ending where everyone else is going to bed, and I'm like, I could go for another 12 hours, bummed out that the party just ended. And, I did something to offend, to upset someone. I broke something, or, whatever, fell down, and yeah, so just a lot of, you don't feel good about what you do, like Mr. Hayden used to say, nothing good happens after midnight, and amen to that. Like, nothing good ever happened for me after midnight. And so there was always funny stories that we could tell. And so there was the camaraderie of buddies, and oh my gosh, this is what I did. This is what happened last night. I remember one time I had this idea that it would be super fun to just fire off flares down 21st Street in Avalon, like 4th of July. And there was a boat in someone's driveway. I'm like, there's probably flares in there. So I sneak in through the canvas, and I'm in there, and I just pass out. I wake up the next morning. They're getting in their car, towing their boat, and I jump out and run back to the Hayden's house, which was like my home base. And, it was a funny story to tell, like, and I sort of, I guess felt like, all right, that's me, that's my deal. And it was, I think it kind of ended that year with, we were in a shore house together. I was up for 2 days straight drinking.
You shaved your head.
Shaved my, yeah, I got like, asked Steve Buno, gave me a mohawk, and I thought that was cool. And then he shaved my head, right?
Yeah.
Punched a window, go to the hospital.
I go
Were you with me?
Yeah, I went to the NBA finals run, and this it was Houston, Orlando, and I remember this doctor looked like Keanu Reeves.
I vaguely remember.
You kept going, Keanu, and then your dad eventually showed up.
Yeah, so my poor dad comes down and to pick me up at a hospital in the Jersey Shore, and I didn't know what year it was or who the president was. So they give me a CAT scan, and I think I had a concussion, and he comes in. And he's like, my dad is just pretty easygoing, and he's like, thank you for taking care of him. And just a question, like, did you have to shave his head for the CAT scan? And they're like, sir, he came in that way. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he drove me up. I'm licking my wounds, and
very scary time for them. I mean,
horrible time for them. I mean, what I put them through. I mean. They were like, you're grounded, and I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to go cut someone's lawn. And they're like, all right, well, you're allowed to work. And I went to a Dead show in D.C. and lost my friends and had to hitchhike home, and that was like, you're supposed to be back in an hour after cutting grass. Like, there was nothing they could do. And I think they were afraid to, really lay down the hammer. And so it was not a good situation. What I learned later is, they both grew up with alcoholic dads, and no one ever talked about it. And it was, they were functioning. And I think at that time, my understanding is no one in the family would have said they were alcoholics. And what I would later learn when we get to that part of the story is, I think it was really painful for them because I was acting not exactly like their dads did, but I think they saw the similar behavior, and I think it was probably opening some wounds for them, which, super, sorry that I did that, but I remember just getting back to your point of like, hey, there weren't really examples of people getting sober, and there was two things that happened that were really pivotal in high school. One was I go down a top 205 lacrosse camp with a couple buddies, and I have fake.
What's top 205? Like,
it's like it was like supposed to be like the
best 205 players.
Yeah, but you just signed up. I was not the best. I was not one of the best 205 players, but that's what it was supposed to be. It was good branding, and so you go down to Loyola, and it was a lot of it was a big recruiting sort of event, and I was. In no shape to be. I mean, I didn't even take my exams. The school was like the school's like, you need to take your exams the beginning of senior year. And we know you're having some mental health issues, or they didn't know what was going on, but we know you're struggling, you're depressed. So we're going to give you a little leeway here, but you're going to have to do it, and you can work this summer on it. Okay. So like, I am not firing on all cylinders. I go down to the camp, and I have a fake ID, so I buy a bunch of booze, like hard liquor, and everyone's like, "Oh, this will be fun. We can drink a little at night." And I just end up in full blown alcoholic mode where I don't even go to most of the games. I'm just staying in the room drinking, and that was the first time where I was like, "Holy shit, this is like." It wasn't even fun. It was like, this is a job, and I am totally incapable of sort of imposing any structure on myself at this time. I'm probably 17 at the time, and I go down to call my mom from a payphone. This was before cell phones, and there's a bank of pamphlets, and there's a "Are you an alcoholic?" pamphlet. And I see it, and I'm like, oh shit, I got it. If I don't look at it, I'm basically saying it. And it was the 20 questions. And I had a lot of yeses to those questions. And based on the test, it was clear that that test said I was an alcoholic. Now, I would have said most of my friends would have answered yes to those questions. And so I was not so sure, but it planted a seed. And then another time, I remember I was a sophomore in high school, and they had a speaker come to school who had gotten in a drunk driving accident. He was in a wheelchair. He killed someone, and I think was sober. I think he was sober at the time. And so those were the only concepts that I ever had of like alcoholic. Like I never knew anyone that was an alcoholic as far as I knew. And I didn't know anything else about it, anything. But I was very focused on like, I've got a problem. I knew there was a problem, and I knew it was a matter of time. Like I was holding on to kind of keep it somewhat together, and it was not together. And then fast forward to the fall of my senior year of high school. And then we can start talking about the good stuff, because this is not there's some funny stories here, but it's really just a sad thing.
The end is
a kid has
for most of us.
Yeah, the kid has to go through that in high school. And so it's October. We're at this point, all my friends were mostly a year ahead of me, are all off at college doing their thing. And my alcoholism is really sort of like, it is there. There's nothing fun about it at this point. I'm not even feeling the way I used to feel when I drank. And it was a Saturday. It was Villanova's homecoming, so I decided to walk over, and I'm like, there was a couple guys, Murph and I don't know. There was a couple people home from college, and I'm like, you know what? I'll walk. I had nothing to do that day. I'm like, I'll walk over to Villanova's homecoming and maybe like join the party there and have a couple drinks. And
well, that area we grew up in, it's the fall.
Yeah, it's the fall.
It's like let's go. Let's have a couple drinks.
But it's like so alcoholic. I'm going alone, right? Like, what the fuck is that about? And my parents were like out. It's like 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I make a gin and tonic. I'm walking over there, drinking. I get there and I'm like, and I don't even feel like I don't even know anyone here. So I walk back, and I'm walking across the Mendel Field of Villanova, and I look up and I see like just the top of the church steeple. There are two crosses on the steeple, and I'm like, I don't know. I was just overcome by this feeling that like there's a God, and like he's got me. It was very odd for me to be thinking about that, really, to be honest. And it was a fleeting moment but it was very. And I remember thinking like, that's sort of odd that I'm feeling this and thinking that. And that night there was a bunch of folks home, and they're all at the Roach and O'Brien's. We're there all day watching football, drinking, and I'm there with my sister. And so there's high school kids, college kids, whatever. And that night I get the idea like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we all took LSD? And so I call someone, and I get 6 hits of LSD, and I go to pick up Murph. I think I took 2 right away, and I only done that once before. So, and they're like, it's really strong, so be careful. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I get to Murph's, and I'm like, do you want to do it? He's like, no, I don't want to do that. And so
because he had to go home.
I take all 6. And long story short, end up in intensive care at Bryn Mawr Hospital. Horrible night. And I'm at one point, I guess I was throwing up and choking, and my sister was trying to help me, and I almost bit her finger off without, kind of gag reflex. So anyways, I wake up the next morning. I'm in intensive care. I'm chained to the bed.
They give you that charcoal treatment.
Yeah,
right?
Charcoal's all over me. I've got tubes. They've got restraints so I don't rip out the tubes. My feet and arms are it feels like I'm on the cross. And the nurses put the TV on, and the Pope is in Baltimore saying Mass. And it's 1995, and I've never felt just so horrible. And that night, in addition to everything that goes along with 6 hits of LSD and a lot of alcohol, I mean, it was a I woke up a different person. And I remember sitting there thinking that night, I was kind of coming out of it and just like, I don't want to hurt my parents anymore. I don't want to hurt my sister anymore. Like, I can't do this like, I'm done. And there was a shift, and like their love for me became more important. And I guess in turn, my love for them became more important than just this. I got out of this like just self-centered loop that I was in, right? This kid loop, this growing up loop that I was in. And my parents came in and said, we think you have a drug problem. And I remember that would have been easy to say. I mean, that was obvious. The question was, do I hold on to alcohol? And do I say, yes, it's just a drug problem? And I thought back to those 20 questions. I thought back to that speaker. And I remember saying, I got an alcohol problem too. And that was very hard for them to, I think, acknowledge, because, there were times where they felt like they contributed to some acceptance around alcohol.
Well, yeah, all of a sudden they're culpable, which is bullshit. I mean,
Yeah.
if you got it, you got it, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And so I get out of there. They take me to see a counselor, this guy, Hank Corcoran, who I don't know if you know.
Oh, I
Yeah.
talked to Hank. Yeah.
Hank was awesome, right? So he had gone to my high school. He was a much older guy, right? He's a drug and alcohol
He
counselor.
played hoops, right?
He played hoops, I think, at Nova.
At Villanova, yeah.
Big guy, like 6'7",
Mm-hmm.
like 60-year-old guy. So I go in to see him a week after getting out of the hospital. And I had a seizure that night in the hospital, so I can't drive. And I hadn't become completely. Well, 2 things happened actually. I told my parents I got a problem. They said, okay, we're gonna go see we're gonna get you help, and we're gonna go see a drug and alcohol counselor. I go see him, and I'm completely honest with him. And he says, listen, if you drink again, you're telling your family you need to go to rehab. And I remember actually wanting to go to rehab and being afraid to ask. And then the other thing that happened is Mr. Hayden heard about what had happened, and he calls me over.
This is one of our best friends' dads, who
Yeah.
is just a.
And I was always really
All-around
close to
great
him,
man,
and,
yeah.
and always was, I like pretty much lived at their house at the shore. And
He's a character. You're a character.
Yeah.
It was a match made in heaven.
we would have had a great time if we were both drinking. But I was always super honest with him about what I did the night before, and he was always sort of blown away by that honesty.
He loved that. That's why he liked me too. If you told him we drank, and he was like, okay, like we got somebody who's not
Honest.
full of shit. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.
And so he calls me over, and I tell him, I give him the whole deal. And he's like, holy shit. And so he says, I got someone, he just loves helping people, right? He's like, I got someone who I want you to meet, and I want your parents to come. And so he sets up this what you would call an intervention, but it was one that I knew was coming. So it was kind of someone to tell their story. So he says, I got this guy, Mo, who was Tony's basketball coach. And he says, I'm going to have them come over and talk to you and bring your parents. So I set this, and my parents were like friendly, but not super close with the Haydens. And so it's a fall night, rainy night. We go to their house in Gladwin, which is like a real nice suburb, and we get there, and it's Mr. Hayden and our family, and we're waiting for Mo to get there. Mo gets there, so
Mo's basketball legend, played hoops at Maryland with John Lucas.
Yeah, so
also had a drug problem.
Yeah, black guy. Like, so Mo walks in. It was the day of the Million Man March in D.C. He had gone to D.C. to march, took a train up, and shows up here at, 8:00 at night, 7:30. And I remember he had a big book with him. And he's coming in to tell his story. And so he comes in and he tells his story. And he does not, his story, to everyone else in the room is probably like, I mean, it was extreme, right? He I think he grew up, if I remember, like pretty poor, black neighborhoods, really good hoops player, went to Maryland, went to the NBA, and then sort of failed, his life fell apart because of drugs and alcohol. And then he has gotten sober. So he's telling this story of all this stuff, and I'm looking around, and I could tell everyone else is like, "Oh my, like, why are we listening to this story?" Like, I can tell my parents are thinking this is not apples to apples, and like, why are we listening to this? I think he'd done some really hardcore drugs, and I'm listening, and I'm just like, I can't relate to all the details, but I can relate to how you're feeling and how you're telling the story. And I then tell my story, like for the first time with no filter. And it was a long night, and everyone's crying. Mr. Hayden's handing out tissues, and he's sitting there, kind of loving the whole like just emotional experience, and it's kind of classic. And I remember we laughed, and Mo's like, we're like, "What do you think I need to do?" And he's like, "I think you need to go to rehab." And I'm like thinking, yes, like I want to get away from everyone. I want to just, and I figured I'd go to rehab and they just heal me and I'd be done. It'd be perfect. And I remember leaving my family. It's like, I don't know, like I don't think that's necessary. I mean, it's pretty public, right, to go leave high school, and I never knew anyone.
It was a completely different climate than it is today.
Yeah. Completely. Like I didn't know anyone, and I'd been to 3 high schools.
Yeah,
so
a lot of kids. A lot of kids end up going to rehab today.
Yeah, they do. And so what had happened is they're like, all right, if you drink again, then rehab's the deal. And I remember it was like one weekend. I think I hung out with maybe you and some other guys, and I didn't drink. And they're like, how was it? And I'm like, it was horrible. And
I was at school. I was at Richmond, so I was hearing. I was hearing all about this stuff.
Yeah,
because we would talk still.
Yeah. And then it was homecoming, our house was completely clear of any alcohol, no posters that could resemble. I mean, I came back from that hospital, and like it was just barren. And I'm like, okay, here's my plan. I'm gonna drink one last time, and then they're gonna send me to rehab, and I'll be healed. And I go to And this is an example of like alcoholism. There was no alcohol in the house, and there was a big bottle of Scope, like mouthwash, that I had heard had alcohol, and I pound the whole thing. And we go out, and I'm at this dance.
Did you get drunk from it?
I don't know if like I got in the car right away and started drinking. So I don't know. I can't really attribute it, but I'll tell you what was different about it is I was supposed to go to the dance and come home, and I go to the dance. I'm like, I'm not going home. I'm gonna have one last blowout night. I call my parents. They're super worried and kind of, I think, in contact with other kids there to sort of shepherd it. And I'm just telling. I remember telling people like, dude, this is the last night I'm gonna drink. Like, I'm done. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I was just, it was different. It was a different night. And then towards the end of the night, I was like, I don't want to stop. And I come rolling home at like 7 a.m, my mom called her brother. He's there at the house, and I'm trying. Now it's the end.
I mean, he's no nonsense, dude, Jerry.
Well, this is different brother. This is my
Okay.
mom's brother, Uncle John.
Oh, gotcha.
And,
Okay.
And he's there, and I remember I'm like, okay, I don't want to stop, because I know if I stop, like, this is my last drink in my mind, and I'm trying to get in an argument with him so he leaves, and I can go down the basement, because I think they've hid something down there, which now that I think about it, it was all gone. And anyways, there's a big emotional sort of blow up, and he's just, and I didn't know it, but at the time they're upstairs packing, coordinating me going to the Karen Foundation, which is a rehab. And the next day, they tell me that night, we're going to Karen tomorrow. I think they thought I would flee, but I'm like, great. Like, I don't. And so they drive me up there the next morning. I'm 17. And it's so funny how it's changed. Like, I'm thinking that I'm going to like go there and start lifting weights, and like they're going to just heal me, and like it's going to be super healthy. And so, and they're like, yeah, we don't have a gym, but and it's totally different now. But they're like, but pick up a carton of cigarettes, because we let the kids have 8 smoke breaks a day. And so, which is insane, right? Like, I'm going into an adolescent unit, right? And this is how early it was, right? So I get in this adolescent unit, which was fantastic.
You're 17, right?
I'm 17. I'm old.
Yeah.
It's 13 to 18. And then if you're 18 and above, you go across the street. So I'm in this group, and I'm like, what am I doing? You know, I'm kind of feeling like, what am I doing here? I mean, a lot of these kids had some totally different upbringings, and maybe some got in trouble with like the law, and I didn't really have that as part of my story. And I get there, and you know, it's like, yeah, we got 8 smoke breaks a day. We're doing rehab stuff, and like the first week, I remember someone came in, and you know, it was cool. Aerosmith had been through there, and which I think is very public, and they had donated
a ton of money,
and, you know, it's like you know, so it was kind of like, I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this? Is this like jail, or is this like you know, I know it's not Harvard. Like, I mean, like what kind of, like, how do I, like, is this a good thing, or what is this? And you know, something happened. I mean, I kind of went in there being like, with the mindset, like, I want to get better. Like, I don't really know what's on the other side of this. And it's very scary when you get to the point where you can't imagine drinking anymore, and you can't imagine not drinking. You know, like, I didn't have this thing that I felt was really my best friend and the most reliable thing. But I was in a safe place where I knew I wasn't going to be tempted. You know, so it's senior year. I leave high school for a month. And I'm up there, and you know, a guy came in. There was a meeting. They would bring AA meetings in, and you know, this guy said, you know, if you're serious about this, you'll go, and you'll even if you don't believe in God, you'll hit your knees tonight, and you'll thank God for keeping you sober today, or your higher power, whatever you want to call it, and then you'll get on your knees in the morning and ask them to help you tomorrow, and then do the same thing just twice every day. And I remember going back to my room. I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I was very fearful of getting on my knees in front of a roommate and being judged, I guess, which is kind of funny that I'm ending up in rehab and I'm worried about being judged by someone else in rehab. But
sounds about right.
You know, but I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And I get on my knees, and I didn't know what I was, you know, I didn't what I was at, who I was at praying to, or did that thing care about me? But I just did it, and I felt a little bit better. And there was just a ton of support from, like, I still somewhere have letters that I got in rehab from all sorts of people. I mean, like, I think the coach of the football team was like, they were winning games for me. I mean, he was just using anything they could do, but. You know, I was getting like letters from a lot of people that really meant a lot to me, to just, like, I didn't feel like I was I started to feel like I'm working on something that's people are behind and this is a positive thing. And, you know, I got out of there and I was pretty focused on getting, you know, like having this work and figuring it out. And I turned 18 there, and came back to high school and came back into, okay, how am I going to,
How do you navigate that?
yeah, it was, you know, I basically had to drop, you know, they talk about people, places and things. And for me, I was like, I need to drop everyone. And I pretty much did, you know, I just said like, I need to just separate from the crew that I was sort of hanging with. And, they told me to go to meetings. And so I did, and I got a sponsor, and I kind of went all in there. But it was, I mean, I look back now, it was kind of crazy. Like I couldn't drive for 6 months after I got, after that hospital event. And so my mom would have to drive me to meetings. And there was a lot of days where I was like, I need 2 meetings a day. And so she would drive me to a meeting, a 6:30 a.m. meeting, which at that time felt so early.
Are the meetings making you feel better?
Yeah. So I'm meeting people that, yes, they're helping. Like I'm meeting people that they would share their stories, and their stories were similar or worse than mine in my mind. And they're living a totally different life. They're happy, they're laughing.
And by the way, that is camaraderie.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, that is camaraderie, right? You got this band of misfits, basically outlaws, who can share those experiences of the craziness. And now we're living on the other side with our jerseys, with our party jerseys hanging in the rafters. It's like, that's over with. Now here we are. Let's kick ass at life. And you have tour guides that can take you there.
100%. I mean, and they were all adults. Like I was 18 still, so I was a kid, and they were, you know, but it's all first name. So I always felt like I was an equal to it. I mean, I remember there was a teacher at my high school that was in the rooms, and there were some friends' parents, you know, not good friends, but there was kids I knew's parents that I'd be in a meeting with, and then I'd see, hey Joe, hey Bob, you know, whatever their names were, and so I had a sponsor, Mike B, who was like God. I mean, he was the best, right? And so he was 22. I met him, and he really took care of me. And I really just was like, hey, I went to him for everything. And I remember one time, early sobriety, I'm senior, and it was a very, you know, I was a roller coaster that first year getting sober. I mean, as hard as the years before that were with my family, that was more, it was hard because I was just doing stuff, but the emotional ups and downs and outbursts, I was raw, man. I had a lot of emotions that I wasn't feeling for years before. Yeah. And, you know, pretty immature with some of those emotions. And so, but I remember that my parents said, you know, hey, you need to take the trash out. And I'm like, I got to call Mike.
Your sponsor.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that's God's plan. And I call him. He's like, yeah, you should take the trash out, Pete. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. But, you know, the beautiful thing with that relationship was I was willing to, like, I knew my best thinking had, like, life went better when I was not operating on my own will and instinct. My instincts weren't that great. And so for me, the 12-step program was a way to give me a blueprint for how to process kind of my emotions. I never thought I was a fearful person, but I had come to learn I was very fearful. And a lot of the things that I did were out of fear of what could happen, what might happen, maybe how I felt about myself. And so Mike really helped me kind of go through the 12 steps. He took me through the 12 steps. And, you know, there were some major moments where AA was really there for me. My grandfather died in that first year. I was very emotional about that. One of the best stories is I was going to my senior prom, and I was very scared about going to this prom. And I called some folks before. I mean, like literally, I'm driving to pick up my date senior year, and I'm crying.
Corey.
Yeah, I'm crying. I'm crying in the car by myself. Like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm scared. I stop off at an AA meeting. I'm in my tux. I go in, and I'm in the meeting, and I'm crying. I'm like scared and maybe mourning that I can't do what everyone else is doing, and I don't know. I didn't even know. I just knew I was upset. And they like just super rallied around you and in the rooms, and they were like, you're gonna do, they were great. They took me next door to Wawa, these older women in AA, and they bought me, they made me like a care package, like candy, and they're like, you can't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and so I remember going to the prom, and I'm like, I feel like I'm getting hungry, and then I left. It was like at the Bellevue Hotel. I left and like went to the Palm and got like a steak, and came back.
It's downtown Philly.
Yeah, I had candy, and like I had like my little way of getting through it, and I'm sure that I was going into the bathroom, going into a stall, hitting my knees and praying, say, God, please keep me sober, keep me sober. This was pre-cell phone, so I didn't have a way to like do that part, but I got through it, and it was a lot of like, should I even go? What's sort of, I had to work that out with my sponsor, and then it was like high school was over. I got my sponsor at my high school graduation. I got my sponsor, college, all these things. But it was like, okay, now I got another big hurdle, which is how to stay sober through college.
And one of the ways you're staying sober through even high school is you took me to my first meeting. I came home.
That's right.
We were still in touch. In my head, I knew at some point I was going to have to pull the ripcord, but it was just too good. It was too good to me at the time. I wasn't there. I hadn't bottomed out yet.
But I remember being super worried about you because of your heart issue.
Yes. I mean, and as well you should have been, as well everybody else was. And you took me to a meeting at Narberth Midday. It was Natalie, Mike, you, and me. And that was like, so anyways, you were helping people. That's how you're doing it.
Yeah, well, well, the cool thing about AA when you learn about it is like literally before whatever 1930 or so when it started, it was if you had a problem, they couldn't really help you. And then two alcoholics got together and realized that when we're sitting across from each other, I can see really clearly you and how crazy what you're doing is, and sort of see the path for you, but I can't see it for me, and you can see it for me. And when I help you, I get a lot clearer about what I should and shouldn't do. And that's how this whole thing, all of a sudden all these medical professionals were trying to solve it, and it's like the thing that works the best is when they work together. And then there's a big
alcoholics. There's
a big spiritual aspect to it, and I was very apprehensive about that because I grew up going to Catholic school. I did not believe what I was being told. I just didn't believe it. And so I was not I was very skeptical about all sorts of different nuances I love the ethos and the culture of Catholicism and that community, that sense of community. I mean, the high school I went to, I remember Christmas morning, I had been sober for maybe 35 days. I got sober October 23rd, 1995. I had 3 teachers from that school call me Christmas Eve morning to say, hey, I'm just thinking about you and everything you've been through. And like, that's amazing. That was amazing. I've got such love for that, for that high school, Malvern Prep. They were like so amazing to me. And when I went through this really tough time, and so, but I,
so you get to college,
but I get to college, and I was,
You go to Villanova.
Yeah, I go to Villanova. It's kind of a, I was gonna go away, and then I went on a recruiting trip to Denver to play lacrosse, and I was like, I can't go. Like I can't be away from my AA network, right? Like I was super fragile. But yeah, I go to college, and I'm struggling at college the first semester. I'm living at home, right across from campus, and meeting people. The whole thing's really challenging. And there was a priest, Father McGuire, who you knew very well, who said, I'd be like, I don't like this isn't. I'm not having fun. I don't know any. It's really hard to like meet guys when you're a day student, meet buddies. You're a day student and you don't drink. Like it's not a like I felt like if I could use my superpower, which at that time I would have said my superpower is I can drink and be social, which is totally misguided because it was bad for me. But I knew it would have helped me really be social. And I really like the image I had was like in Superman where he loses his superpowers and he sort of goes into situations which used to be fine and he kind of gets his ass kicked.
He does.
That's how I felt going to a frat party. Like, I'm just like the sober dude. Like most people thought I never drank. They're like, yeah, you should try drinking. I'm like, yeah, I have. And so really what changed for me in college was this priest suggests, he's like, why don't you walk on a lacrosse team? And I went to go talk to the coach, and I had already missed the fall ball tryouts, and I go talk to the coach. I tell him my deal, and he was super. He had someone in his family that had gotten or maybe needed to get sober or got sober. I don't know, but he was super. He's like, I'll give you a shot, but you gotta whatever. So I ended up. He's like, you need to displace someone on the team because I've already had the team, and you start working out. I was so out of shape, and a guy from AA actually said, hey man, I'll train you.
Tony.
Yeah, this guy Tony. And so for like 4 months, he would meet me at 7 a.m. every Saturday and Sunday and just work the shit out of me. And I had never been in shape all through high school. I mean, with all the drinking and drugs and whatever, I was the guy that the coaches were like, you could be all state if you just got in shape. And he gets me dialed in, and I make the team, and it was so important for me to have sort of an anchor at college and being sober, and the team I was super open about it, and my strategy there was like, I just wanted to like build insurance that I wouldn't drink, and if they knew my deal. And so they were great, and I have great memories of that experience. I remember being freshmen. They do like some like hazing stuff. They're pouring booze on you and whatever. And they had jugs of water they were pouring on me, and they were really cool about it. And so I went to college. I was my rule was I'm going to be more active in my AA group than with college at all times was really the goal. And I also, they have a saying in the rooms, you sit in a barber chair long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And so, my thing was like, well, I can't just completely avoid being social in college. Like that's not really an option, but I can't also just roll and act like I can't just be a college kid and not drink. Like that's not going to, I'm going to need to do something different. I'm going to need to work at it. And so my thing was like, I always wanted the option to be able to go out on the weekend and, meet girls and hang out and sort of do that. And so the goal was like, all right, I can only do that if I'm on a good spiritual ground. Like if I'm in a bad headspace, I can't put myself in that situation.
And that's the beauty of sobriety, right? You mentioned Superman with no powers. A spiritually fit dude is kind of like Superman, a sober person. I mean, you met your wife in college.
I did, yeah. Yeah, I met her at we had a Christmas in the Caribbean party. We filled the basement at the Lax house with sand, and I had never met her, so I met her. Yeah, we were the same year, and is senior year I met her, which really made college worth it. But college was not. I mean, it was a bit of a challenge. I had to kind of go to the beat of my own drum. I ended up leaving full time as a sophomore or junior. I mean, and I started a business and.
North American Air Care?
Yes.
I remember. Dude, and that's, from a view in the cheap seats, we got like 25 minutes left, all right? So Mike can get out of here, go on with his day, but this is awesome. A view from the cheap seats is, you were a shining, I don't want to miss out on an opportunity to talk about the fact that you are a shining example to a guy like me that like, I got to keep this sobriety thing in my back pocket because it is clearly working for this dude. I mean, you're in college, you're playing sports, you're meeting your wife, you're starting up a business. This is college. I mean, and you're still cool to be around. I mean, I kept in touch with you. Like I didn't, we never completely lost touch. No. And that was because I knew that at some point, I knew in the back of my mind, I'm going to have to go this route, and so all the stuff you're doing is a real shining example. And that's how AA works, right? Yeah, I mean, and you really stopped. Like there was a point in time early on where you were kind of pitching it to us, like guys you were really close with. Like, you're an alcoholic, dude. Don't you know that? And I didn't want to hear that.
You learn pretty quick that no one wants to hear that.
Yeah. And so it's promotion by attraction, and so, but go ahead. I mean, that's just, you're helping people without even trying and that's how the program works. I'm like, this guy is on to something here. Definitely.
Yeah, it's funny, you say that from the cheap seats, but the way it felt at the time, I mean, it felt like a lot better. I mean, I felt like my life was definitely improving, but it did not feel like, it felt like I was weird and odd at a lot of the time, I mean, I was like, I had to do my own deal.
How do you think I felt? I'm still drinking 4 beers before I call a girl. And
maybe everyone really feels that way.
That's the conundrum
at that time, right? No matter. I mean, I was a very if you went back, I think most people would say I was a very popular kid in high school, but I didn't feel. I felt pretty alone at a lot of that, and so I mean, I think everyone has. Just growing up and being human beings, like we have all these sort of emotions and feelings, and you never really know what someone is feeling. That's what's one of the cool things about when you sort of spend a lot of time in a 12-step program. People share about how they're feeling, and you kind of know everyone's got something going on, kind of at all times. I mean, just that is the human condition in life, and. So the way I stayed sober was just really heavy in the AA was just super part of me. I mean, it was the most important thing at all times. Sponsoring people, I got service. I did some speaking at high schools when I was in college, and that felt good. And I think kind of the thing was like I just tried to make sure that I was running hard towards growing as a person in AA, like spiritually, just feeling good in my own skin at the end of the day. I mean, what I loved about alcohol was I could put it in me and it'd make me feel good about me. It made me feel good about my life and like it was like puzzle pieces of my life. And before a drink, I felt like shit was not looking good. And, for whatever reason, and externally, like things were fine. And I was, with alcohol, it helped me like rearrange the puzzle pieces. And then I'd all of a sudden feel really good about everything and I could calm down. And then a bunch of bad shit would happen. Well, you come in and you start working the steps and it's like you get a relationship for me, I got a relationship with a higher power that really helped me do all the things that alcohol did, but did it for real and did it in a way that was sustaining and that I could help other people. I never helped anyone when I was doing that. And so that's an amazing thing. And to be able to like whatever, just share what guys in the room shared with me with other people that are trying to get sober, and I've had a chance. This past October was 25 years sober, which was sort of mind blowing, and just like super grateful for the role that I mean, I've been a part of a lot of cool groups and organizations, and nothing compares to, the people in AA for me. Like that's my tribe. Those are my people. And they make me a better person. And, my wife has never known me to drink. I've got 3 kids. They've never known me to drink, but, my wife knows when I need a meeting, she can sense that. Like I just get, a little edgy and just a little difficult. And, so it's been the most amazing thing. And then I've been able to be out there, and, I'm good at certain events like weddings or other stuff like that. Like sometimes people be like, that guy's hammered, and, I'm not, right? And so people that know me are like, no,
you're a fun guy.
Just having fun. And I think in college in particular, those are hard years, right? Like everyone is drinking, maybe arguably alcoholically, and they're not all alcoholics, right? So they kind of typically grow out of it, hopefully. And so to be able to, I mean, there were a lot of times where I'm like, if nothing else, like I want to be an example that you can have fun. And if there are any people here that have a problem someday, at least they'll have an example of, like, I knew a guy that was sober, and that did get me through.
Dude, you helped so many. I mean, I called you in 2002. I had my first like major breakdown. And you were there. You were at my house taking to a meeting the next day. And I can't tell you how many like Hail Mary phone calls I made to you. Oh. You took me to Karen one time. I mean, how magical is this? You take me to Karen to see somebody get their 1 year chip, or no, get a chip, I think, or they were there. They were there. Visiting. So we go to visit a guy that was there. Okay.
You were so hoping I was taking you to stay
because I was getting ready.
Yeah, on the way home, you're like, dude, I really thought you were going to leave me there. I'm like, I didn't know you wanted to go.
It was a year before I got sober. So anyways, that guy is there. A year later, I asked that guy to be my temporary sponsor when I can't stop drinking. Oh. And he tells me, you need to go to Karen. And a week later, I'm there. I mean, that's kind of how it just all threads together. If I don't know him through you, maybe I don't ask him to be my temporary sponsor, and maybe he doesn't tell me.
Yeah.
It's just, and maybe I'm still out there. Like, so much stuff, and you never gave up on me. You never gave up on a lot of our friends. And
well, it's not even giving up. It's just like, hey man, the view was like, I don't really know. I mean, with you, I was kind of like, I think you probably got a problem, right? Like, but
yeah.
But I don't know. Like, yeah. I know that, maybe your life would be better. So I never felt like I was, judging or giving up or not giving up. It's like, hey man, like there's a plan, and if I can be helpful, great. It helps me to help you, even if you don't take it and it doesn't stick. You try to really early on look at ways to, not get too tied into the success of someone coming in, right? Like you never know if you're just helping plant the seed or if they're going to get it. And I'm just super grateful I got it. But it's been, I will say, it's been so fun for me over, like, how much time do you have now?
9.5 years.
Yeah. So like, I feel like you were maybe one of the first of like my buddies that kind of came in. But now there's a couple of us.
Yeah.
And just to see, to be able to sort of, because there was a lot of years where I just felt like I was, I had a ton of buddies in the program, but buddies that I had partied with before. Mm-hmm. And then after, it was, it's just super fun to be able to connect with guys that I grew up with in this area, because I'm not the person that I was before, right? And none of us are, right? Like we are fundamentally different people. Like we'll talk about all sorts of stuff, and so that's been super awesome to see, you and Murph, who you had on the program here,
Yeah.
and there's a couple other dudes.
Yeah.
So we have that meeting that we do, and I feel like half the guys are guys that I met when I got sober in high school. So
My brother Mike is in that meeting. You got sober before him. I mean, this is just a throwaway story with your whole. He went and got you out of jail down the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I mean, and now you guys are in a meeting together. He certainly wasn't sober then, but like, because he's about four years older than us. But like, that's kind of just like that's the puzzle, right, on the other side, kind of coming together. It's amazing.
Yeah, dude. It comes together, and like, no one there's that saying, you don't show up to. I think your brother said it to someone else. You don't show up here in a limo.
Yeah.
You don't show up to AA or a 12-step program in a limo, right?
Yeah.
Like things are going awesome, right?
Yeah.
And then you just see that it's it takes some time that first year, but your life gets better really quickly. And to see people's lives get better it's just awesome. Like you wouldn't bet against I would never bet against someone who's going to stick around.
Yeah. What do you tell your kids?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So I have told my older two that I am a recovering alcoholic and I'm sober. I haven't told, there's some other parts of my story that I didn't share just because I don't know if they're going to get a hold of this podcast. Mm-hmm. And, I want to be very sensitive when I kind of give them the full story of how bad things really were for me. And how I felt super, I get nervous about my kids. This is a hereditary thing, can be at least. So I try to impart on them some basic.
I mean, but they know you're in AA. They know you're sober.
My older two do. My youngest he doesn't know.
Okay.
I don't think he knows that. I'm pretty sure he doesn't.
I mean, I remember calling you one Christmas, telling you I had all this trouble going on. I'm like 4 years sober. And after I tell you, like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're on speaker with Ryder. Ryder, Pete's not trusting God right now. I'm like, son of a bitch,
Well, that was funny. That's actually, that was the spawn of me telling him, and it was kind of a funny story, but we probably don't have time to get into that. Yeah. But I did tell my kids, and, what I try to do is, there's certain things you learn in AA, like that I try to pass on to my kids. So here's some examples. When you are resentful at someone, you learn to what?
Pray for them.
Pray for the person, right? And so I remember my daughter having some issue at school when she was really little, and I'm like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say a prayer for that girl who's being mean to you, for her to have all the good things you want. And she looks at me like, are you kidding me? She's like, I want the good things. And I'm like, and so what I've tried to do is just parent in a way that teaches some of those principles that I know to be true, that I know to work. And, and that, God forbid, if anything happened to me and I wasn't there to be able to, and they needed to go to a meeting and take them, I want them to know what's what, right? And so you learn certain things. Like I learned, my sponsor told me early on, like, hey, dude, you're going to hit your knee, whether you believe in God or not, you're going to hit your knees every morning and night. You're going to ask him to help keep you sober and help you to be of maximum service to others today. And then you're going to thank him. And so, my kids have seen me hit my knees and I'm saying, hey, come here, let's shoot up a prayer. And so, I try to teach some of the things that I learned that hopefully make them a better person. And the best thing that I've learned is, what the cool thing about the program is you don't tell people what to do. You just share, hey, this has been my experience. And I find that very helpful with my kids to say, hey, I'm not sure how you're feeling right now, but when I was your age and something like this happened, this is how I felt. And especially my son, Ryder, he kind of gets choked up when I do it. He's like, that's how I feel, Dad. And to be able to just have real open conversations with kids, like I kind of had stuff like that with my parents, but it wasn't. I remember my dad coming up, and he could tell I was going off, like I was depressed, and he gives me a Brian Tracy cassette tape pack, like a motivational thing, and he says, why don't you start listening? I'm like 15 years old. He's like, why don't you start listening to this to help get your head in the right space? And he said, he's like, I heard that like alcoholics have to look in the mirror every day and say, my name's Pete and like whatever, I'm an alcoholic, to remind themselves. And that was a throwaway comment he made. I remember 2 weeks later being in front of the mirror saying, my name's Pete and I am not an alcoholic. Like that's what I took away from that. And so, I hope that I can, I certainly don't do it. I got I'm sure I would do a lot of things different as a parent, and you always question what you do, but I try to be probably more open than not about what I did. Try not to highlight the drugs, try to be very clear, like, dude, pills off limits. And it's hard today, like now weed's legal.
Yeah. So
it's not like I'm like, you can never, and I don't really view a difference between alcohol and marijuana to me. Mm-hmm. And so like, I'm not an anti-alcohol guy or like, if that works for you, go for it. Right. I'm pretty much anti-heroin. I'm pretty much anti-painkillers. Yeah. Like I'm anti that in all situations. Yeah. But other things, like for the right person, like that's, I don't have an opinion on that, but I do worry about my kids. And so I just hope to be a good example and hopefully, it won't come to them, because it's I get, parents will ask me sometimes, they have a kid who's struggling, what do I do? And I'm like, there's some things to do for sure, getting help, but why one person gets it on the first try, like there's nothing special about me. I wasn't more disciplined or had better willpower than you, who maybe came in a couple times. I got it the first time. Hell, I could be in a situation in 5 years from now where you're trying to help me, get sober again. Yeah. And I don't want to let my first defense down.
A couple more things I want to hit before we're out here. One, Cliff Notes version of how your sobriety helped you through. You mentioned your dad. Mm-hmm. I mean, here's a guy, he was a figure in my life, and he was a guy that meant everything to you. He eventually does die from cancer. Yeah. How do you use sobriety to guide you through that?
Yeah, that was so. Yeah. So in 10 years ago, maybe a little longer than 10 years ago, he got cancer again, and about 30 years from when he originally got it. And they said, hey, look, it was, I think, as a result of the treatment he got in the 70s, they had told him then, hey, what we're giving you now is going to end up causing cancer, like the radiation. And it came back. And they're like, basically your body can't take any more radiation or chemo, so you're gonna die. And it was a 6 months, he kind of called and said, we had a conference call as a family, and he's like, they gave me 6 months to live.
How many years do you have at this time?
A lot. Like I was 10. I think it was 10 years ago, so I had 25, so like I was probably like 12, 15 years sober. And so he so what we did was like the program, and someone said to me who had lost a brother, the guy who was your temporary sponsor had lost a brother of his, and he just said, like, hey man, if you handle this the right way, this will be one of the most meaningful life experiences. And so for us, what that looked like was I was able to sort of use what I learned in AA, like get some resources around my dad. Father Rob, the Villanova Hoops priest, was really great through that for us. My dad was struggling with his own spirituality, like you do when you're dying. And we were super open. I'd taught, hey, how are you feeling about it? Are you scared? What are you thinking about God? Like we had some real direct conversations about it and it was about he had kind of 3 months. It was like May. I think he told us in May, and he died September. And so we shared about how he's feeling. I'd sent out some emails to family, friends. He was really overwhelmed by the support he got from people. Like kind of people coming over and just saying how much they cared about him. He was like, I didn't think this many people, really, I impacted this many people. And it all culminated on, when he did finally pass away. It was, a bit of a relief, your dad had passed away.
Yeah,
more
you helped me
recently.
through that with your experience.
But, people helped me in AA that had been through it. Like, you learn in AA, like, I got to go find people that have been through this experience, and I got to seek counsel, and I got to make the most of the situation, and I got to bring God into the situation, and I got to lean in and not, it's okay to be afraid, but I need to move past that and believe that there's actually a beautiful experience to happen if I really lean in. And for me, where that culminated was at his eulogy. And my sister and I gave the eulogy along with his doctor. And we did our own. And, I really shared about the role that my dad played in getting me turning my life around, and how bad things were and then how good they were. And, I was able to, my dad was my best friend, really from the point of that I got sober. And he kind of thought I was, in many ways he looked up to me. And that was, we kind of had like a little bit of I'd say in some ways the roles were reversed a bit. And in other ways, not at all, where I was clearly looking up to him. But he was a great dad. He was just, because of him having cancer early on, he was always about just family and being with us. And so I try to be more like that, where I can be a little more caught up in things. And he was much more of just enjoy every moment of life. But, to be able to I think we handled that. He taught us how to die. And that's what I said. I'm like, Dad, your job right now, like you're showing us how to die, which is pretty intense to say, but he did. He taught us, and I'm like, let's try to make the most of the situation, and let's share this with other people. Maybe it'll help other people go through this. And he was all on board with that, and so that was that.
What about business? How is it? You've become extremely successful in your field, your line of work. How have you applied it? You've made some major moves in your life. How have you used sobriety to help you professionally?
I think that, if I wasn't sober, I wouldn't have had any success, right? So I've had the ability to have some really cool career experiences, investing and as an entrepreneur, and I run a software company now that focuses specifically on the mental health industry, and I was drawn to that because I thought it would be really cool to provide some innovation and do stuff for a space that's helping people. And so that's been neat for me, that, so it kind of drew me a little bit to a path. But I think where it plays in is just, my emotional IQ. I think I have high emotional IQ as a result of doing step work and reflecting and having to go through a lot of things. And so, I'd say I'm pretty good at looking across the table from an employee that might be struggling with something, and kind of really quickly tapping into the emotion that's going on, and then saying, all right, let's not be afraid here. Let's get a game plan and move forward without being afraid. Just because there was a lot of times in life where I was afraid, and that's probably the biggest thing that I learned is just, I don't need to, I need to act, and I need to act as if good things are going to happen. And no matter what, like, I've been fine. Like, not everything has worked out, right? So that's where I think it's helped from, in terms of being a leader of an organization and being able to be authentic, and hopefully, I look at running a business as as like a platform to be able to impact a sphere of people you interact with. And that's really fun and cool, and grateful for that experience.
Anything else?
No, man, but I just want to say thanks. This was super fun to be able to come in person, see you in the studio as I'm driving across country from Phoenix with my son and dog. to Philly, and this was a little out of the way, but I was like, we got to do it.
Yeah.
And so this was fun, man. I really love what you're doing with this podcast, and it's super meaningful to have this conversation with someone that's like was there for the.
Well, dude, I mean, if not for you, I probably am not sitting here. I mean, so you have the utmost of gratitude and love coming from me. I mean, you were a way out for me early on, and got me interested in the other side. I always knew because of you, I had a place to go. I had somebody to call, and it took me a little while to find a place in that place. But I mean, holy shit, you know, I can't believe my life today. You know, even this morning, just having you here, I was like, man, I'm just real grateful for this. So,
yeah, I'd say for anyone listening that like maybe is listening because they can relate, you know, if they could relate to even a little bit of what was shared, and they're thinking about their drinking, or, you know, the role that drinking and drugs is playing in their life, that, you know, go check out a meeting, because I can assure you that it only gets worse if you have a drug and alcohol problem. If you're thinking a lot about it, that's probably a good sign that you might have a problem. And that just to know that it's beyond. There's a guy, Bob Cleary, used to say, "My life's so good, I'm embarrassed to talk about it." And there's a saying we have is like, "Hold on before the miracle happens," or "It's beyond your wildest dreams." And I'd say, and I'm sure it is for you, like it is for sure beyond my wildest dreams, and it's a beautiful place to go. I'm so grateful. If I could take a pill or have a surgery and not be an alcoholic and just have to walk away, I wouldn't, from like AA. Like it's such a meaningful part of my life, and I'm so grateful. If I could guarantee that my kids would get sober, I'd say make them an alcoholic, and so they could have this program, right?
Sure.
It's just it's such a unique, beautiful thing, and if you have a problem, you get to take advantage of that. I wish sometimes there was something like this for everyone, because it's a fucking awesome thing, and I'm grateful for it. So thanks for having me in studio, Pete.
It's great. Hey, Mike, thank you too, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
All right. All right, man, awesome. Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Sousa, and of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
Pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Mike.
And we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the two of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros, Foes, Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.